Hi, I'm Jeremy. Welcome to our farm and our house build, Cornucopia orchards. Oh, that was my car horn going off. Sometimes when I move around, my personal thought is that that's because they make things, pants, and just about everything else too skinny these days. But I'm a curmudgeon. I didn't start on one of the ends of the wall. I actually did the middle first, and then I went back and I did this one. Then I did this over the door, and now I'm going to finish out against this wall. And I would definitely not do that if this outside wall was going on finished first. Totally fine with this interior wall breaking my normal ideal rule of interior hits to the exterior on your corners of drywall. This jack is protruding. It's maybe an 1/8 at worst, but it's out from the king. And so I'm going to have it dive in here, and then the screws are all going into this piece here for the drywall and whatever little trim board ends up making its home here. So we're most of the way through with this house, and I have one of these big buckets down and about 1/3 of 1 5/8 of a bucket here. And those ones are 4,000 count, I think. These ones are 1,000 count, and one entire, I think, 1,200 count of the number 6 by 1 1/4 of that Metabo HPT collate. So that kind of gives you an idea. I mean, I've got this big room here and these stairs here, and that's a little bit left in the hall. That's really all the big areas that are left that need done. That gives you a rough idea of how many screws maybe for finishing out your place. The main area of this house was 1925, I think, for square foot, or 1975. So it's just under 2,000 square feet. And I'm fairly confident that about 7,000 screws in total. That's probably about where we would sit for the total number of drywall screws. 16 centers on the walls, 12s on the ceilings. So this is what happens when my son is left unsupervised for a few moments. So on this door I'm next to, I've got to be careful routing around it, because otherwise, if that slips, that bit is possibly going to come right across that finished wood surface. And I don't know how much of it is going to get covered, probably up to 1/4 on that jamb, but got to be careful. So the same as elsewhere, we're going to do a little cheat here. So this is a 9-foot ceiling, and so these are 4-foot sheets, 48 inches. And that would mean that I would have 3 joints. However, I've got such a small space here where that would matter that I'm okay with it, because your 48 inches in this circumstance is going to come down here and hit that stairway. And so you'll just have this teeny tiny strip basically from there to the door where it's a 3rd strip. And then I don't have to do some really funny stuff with some longer sheets. So thinking back to why that happened, I think I have an explanation. So in this wall, the header is up there. And that's just because of the way that I chose to run that header. So there are little jacks, little cripples up above there. And so this board, I didn't care if this board, you know, the intersecting 2x6 doesn't sit on that. It's not acting as a jack for that because the header's up there. So those go all the way up to that header for this door and window combo. So you can see right here in the corner, when that bit hit that little teeny tiny gap, it just kept ripping right on up. And obviously I'm just a dummy for letting it go that far before realizing I was way above the height of the window. But that's why that happened. And I find that that's something that whenever I overshoot, that's usually why, is because of, you know, your intersection here in a corner. Like on this one, I was really careful. You can see there's that tiny gap right there. And if I hadn't, you know, kind of angled that bit to hit this, it might have traveled right down past. But this came out pretty nice. Just gonna be a real tiny little piece so I can get in there, and it'll be a factory tapered. So it should be pretty easy for me to handle that. I mean, that entire section of it's gonna be behind the skirt board, so it doesn't really matter. So it's really just this one little bit where there's something I gotta worry about. In fact, I realized I needed to cut out that little chunk right there to finish that board. And it is perfect for this spot here. Just a little too large, so it's gonna fit in there great. Ready to install a closet, all of the drywall for this little closet here. And this is a coat closet. It's technically in what would be considered the foyer for the house, although we probably won't see it used that way all that often because it's quite the walk down a flight of steps from the deck to get to the ground below. And let me show you what I'm looking at here, because you've got to figure out where your blocking is, and this is what I'm using. So first, yes, this is PT. It was a scrap that I had, and I am using the appropriate screws for it. It's exterior rated on that those screws. Can't get a nail gun in here. The bottom of our blocking is 64 in case we do need to come down and to prevent a split. To be able to put stuff in on top of the shelf on the top of the door. There is quite a bit of room up in here. It's 9 inches up to the platform from the top. So nice little roomy space in there for storage. Should be able to fit bottles and other things into here and set them on top of that shelf. It's only a single hanging. If it were a double, I'd have to go much higher for like 80 inches or so, about the height of the door. So a single hang with a shelf. We were talking in the realm of about 70 inches for the shelf and 66 to 68 for the hangers is what we're doing. This is a standard size closet as far as the depth goes, so 24 inches deep. And that means you're gonna wanna center your rod right in the middle of that at 12 inches as far as, you know, your depth from the back of the wall. We've arrived at that time of spring where everything's out of control and the gardener in me desperately wants to do something about it, but I don't have time. I don't have energy, and I definitely don't even have the right tools. Oh man. Chickens are perfectly happy. Boys are enjoying feeding them some weeds, and we're gonna get them some cut grass in a little while here. We got our lawn mowed before it gets unmowable. And let me take you over and we'll look at the field. It's done a lot of growing this last year. It's looking pretty great, honestly. I'm pretty pleased with it. So Down here is where we worked everything and got all, you know, fresh grass planted last year, killed all the weeds. There's a little bit of thistle kind of up here in the top where it didn't really get tilled. And next to the trees, there's still some stuff that's come up, mostly brambles. But other than that, it's clean, it's clear. It's not as thick as I would like it to be. And that's partly because, what can you do? Yeah, you can balance. It's partly because, you know, we killed a fair amount of the flora and the fauna in the soil when we tilled, but it's recovering. Like this spring, it's growing a lot better than it did last year. On the top half here, there's some pretty good areas, like right up in here. You can see how lush it is right through there, kind of a line. That's where the trench was. So that soil has depth to it and light, fluffy structure. And it had also created a depression when it had sunk down a little bit on its own, you know, just naturally. And that depression got filled in and leveled out over the top with the mulch that we used from our neighbor's horse pile. You can see over here, back behind me on this side, that's just whatever grass grew on its own. There wasn't any mulching, and up here, this thick, that's where the mulch was heavy. And that really makes a difference. So all sorts of debris. I gotta get this all cleaned up for the summer. Gotta get my little small engine there fixed. It stalled out on me last year towards the end of my making, you know, that firewood, and I think it just had some gas it didn't like. So I gotta get that up and running. Hello, little Robin. Got a worm in your mouth there. But I want to take you over here and show you our apple trees. So last year, remember I was saying these things did not grow very much. This spring, they're putting on massive growth. I mean, we're already at more than a foot on most of these where they have a top, like a clear top selected. And there's a reason for that. Let's take a quick check before I get into that on chicken water situation. This will be the third fill in the past, I don't know, 5 months. Yeah, it's full. You turn the water on for me, little one?
Yeah.
Okay.
That water on.
Okay, let's find out. So if we turn off this one, turn this one on, what do you think is gonna happen? Is it gonna get you?
No.
Might be kinked. You think it's kinked somewhere? So we've got all these plants over here, and we do not, I mean, this is a jungle. You can see where we had the garden last year and the pigs the year before. It's just the best on the whole property as far as the soil goes. It's amazing what a little bit of proper, you know, animals working the land and the extra nutrition from all of that comes into play. This location here inside of our double deer fence is really the only place where they're safe from the deer right now. And so that's where they're gonna stay until we're more fortified. So apple trees. So this one, I pinched off all of the buds on this guy, and you can see I gotta get this cage adjusted for height because the deer will still reach and nibble that, believe it or not. And for width because it's pushing the outside this year. But I have 2 apples that we are keeping in there. And I'm not gonna push this poor tree any more than that. It's too young for that. This one's got some great top growth. It is smaller. It was a smaller caliper to begin with. And I gotta get the cage on this one adjusted. This one too. And last but not least, this one. And this one does also have an apple somewhere. I forget where. Just, I think 1, maybe 2 at most. But yeah, the growth on this one is the most limited of the group. And I don't 100% know why, but I do know why all of them were limited last year. So what it comes down to is they were all limited because the soil had not yet gotten a really good biology back. So we had scraped this, you recall. It had been basically bare bare clay because of just what was going on with this soil. And we amended it with 6 inches of top dressing of bark and twig and leaf that was all chipped up. Now, that material has a lot of benefits to the soil, but the very first year of application, it is going to slow your biology down because it's got to start decomposing, and it's got to get laced with that mycelium throughout the soil, which it will do on its own in most places. And certainly, this was a forest area, sort of brushy forest, and so it's there. It just needed to spread and interconnect with the roots of the trees. And with how hot it was last summer and the length of time between waterings, like we watered them and they stayed alive, but they didn't really thrive that first year. And one of the things that people talk about a lot with gardens is if you use bark or sawdust, you're going to bind up your nitrogen in the process of that being decomposed. And that is true, but it's also not true. So it's true in the sense that before you get a good interconnection with your mycelia, with your roots of your plants, it is, they're trying to get material and they can't. It's not available. It's being pulled into that rot process. But then once you have them interconnected into the roots of the trees, then like this spring, they can form an exchange. The plant releases sugar into the soil to attract the mycelial roots. It's making the sugar via photosynthesis, right? And that's what it offers. And then the mycelia comes and says, that sounds delicious. I can't get that because I don't have photosynthetic capabilities. And so the mycelia comes and offers something of its own in exchange. And what it's really good at doing is it sends out like this huge biomass of filamentary roots, much finer roots than the tree is capable of doing by itself. And it hooks in to the tree roots and they form an exchange. They exchange, nutrients that are being pulled by the mycelia from the soil and given to the plant. The plant says, hey, I want to trade for this sugar. This is what I need. And the mycelia says, I'm happy to supply that in exchange for the sugar because that's what I want right now. It's one of those, exchanges that takes a while to set up, and you can kickstart it if you don't, if you're planting into a grassy field that was not forest before. It's not going to have that even at depth. The chances of there being a whole lot of is going to be bacterially dominated. Okay, so you're going to have to introduce some. If you want to jumpstart the process, you'll have to introduce some mycelia into the soil to help out. And you can just grab, anything that looks like this thick woody material here. There it is. Boom. I didn't have to go anywhere to find that to show you. It's right here, right below the surface, all over this bark chip. And you can get it from the forest and introduce it, and that's all it's going to need to start taking off. But in that first year, you can supplement your plant's needs for minerality or for NPK because its weak root structure is not going to be able to uptake, find and uptake that on its own while the mycelia gets established if you need to. I did not, and the plants basically stalled for a year. So, I very well could have. If I were to do it again, I probably would have made some compost teas. But again, this assumes the time to do it. So when we do the orchard, I will probably do some compost teas and maybe just a little bit of NPK pellet. The issue there is that NPK fertilizers they're this massive dose of chemical, and it's really not chemical that's in a state that's available to the plant. And so it goes into the soil in this state that's not available, and some of it becomes available, and that's where the benefit comes from for the plant, but you're spiking it, and that can leach down into the lower levels of soil. It can be runoff, and it's incredibly expensive. Oh my goodness, it's expensive. So if you can provide nutrition for your plants in some other way, especially off of you know, a compost tea or something you're making out of your own property, or like we did this spring to help them out, you know, get a really good start after last year with our chicken fertilizer. That's an amazing source to be using to help supplement. And you don't want to use it if it's really fresh. Okay, so we have so few chickens that most of what's on these plants right now is old. You know, it's an older compost at this point. It's been around for a while. You don't want it, it's called hot if you take it and it's too much of the actual fresh poop from the chickens. So don't use that, let it decompose a little bit. One thing I found with this big old tank is that when I go to recap it after filling every couple months, I'm not going to recap it to where it's tight and cinched down, because if I do that, then when it starts to get low, it literally crumples the tank inwards. I'm afraid I'm gonna break it if I do that. Looks like we've got some eggs back there. Damien, you wanna come get those eggs back there in the corner? Oh, you want me to get them? Okay, I'll get them. I have out and about slip-ons on. Hi, girls. Oh, you were taking a dust bath. You're okay. Is this their favorite spot? These chickens seem to have a bit of a preference for ground laying. Hello. How are you, girl? These chickens are old at this point, and we've kept them past when we were going to keep them. It's a recycled egg carton here. I don't even know who bought these, but it's okay. You know, at some point along the way, we will be getting new, probably next year, we'll get some, like a bunch of new chickens. These ladies are doing fine for now, just nowhere near as many eggs for the amount of feed that we're investing. So one thing I'm keen on watching is how things are going in our attempt to murder this horrid creature right here. Some poison oak. We have some there. There's a little bit back in there. You can probably barely not see that one. You can. There's some down here. And there's a little bit right there. And anywhere where it's anywhere near us, we're trying to kill it. So this area right in here, where the boys love to play by the tractor, over the last couple of years, it's had sprout patches. I can't till here, because if I do, I'm gonna damage this big old maple here, which I don't wanna do. And if I till even a little bit further over, I'm gonna damage this fir. And that fir already had the ends of its roots cut in order for that pad down there to go in. And I do not want to make it sad. That is a shop killer right there. So, plus I like it. But what we've been doing is we've simply been digging it out where we find it. And all last summer, this whole area, especially right here. And in fact, I see one right now coming out. So I will dig that out. But so far, there hasn't been any of the other 7 or 8 patches that have come back up. And it's been 7 or 8 weeks where other areas, as you've seen, like up in there, those big ones, where they've been coming out. So with persistence, you can kill poison oak if it's a small, section. The issue with this one is that I really should till it. There's a root right there. It's why I haven't, because I know that there's some more structure that goes back into here with the root. And if I were to dig that out, it would die. The treatment process is a multi-year process. The only way I'm aware of to simply flat out kill it is you till it and you let the tilth dry all the way through, which is what we did last year. And in the field out here, where we had success with getting rid of it completely first try, spraying it's going to take several years of spraying, which is what we did here. That one, I know we had a plant there and it was much bigger. We sprayed it and then cut it out, and then some back in here we'd sprayed too. And you're going to be spraying and digging if you're just taking out a bit at a time. Like a lot of plants, if you allow that woody tissue to dry, it kills it all the way. And it's really hard with most of these formulations of herbicide to get the right concentration for the plant, and it changes different times of the year. The right concentration changes depending upon where the leaf stage is at and the weather and other things as well. You can flash burn it. You know, you want to kill all the way down to the roots, but it can kill the plant so fast that it doesn't make it down into the roots. Or you can spray it and it doesn't actually kill the plant, it just makes it kind of annoyed with you. And then, you know, it sends up more after a while. So it's a difficult thing to achieve in my experience with spray. And it's certainly not pleasant to go out with a shovel and try and cut through it and, you know, get rid of it via a shovel, because, you know, what you end up having with the shovel work is you're much more likely to get exposed to it. Now, I can tell you that best I can tell, if you're persistent with digging out small patches, you know, so spot treating small emerging poison oak groupings, that will work. So little spading, all of these small roots in here that you're seeing, that's poison oak root. And so this thing was spiderwebbed way out to there and all around into here, and that's why the tilling, in my opinion, is a valid response to this stuff, because it's so hard to get rid of. It spreads via root as well as via seed. Well, we'll be headed back down to the house. We're gonna get the remaining drywall done, the last major room. In the next video, we'll have the office all wrapped up, and that's just gonna leave stairs and then what needs done still in the attic. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.